All right, y'all, welcome into the show, Four Verticals Podcast, episode 175 for April 21st, 2026, the last few weeks of April. That means we're getting closer and closer to college football. Granted, it's still about 5 months away, 4 or 5 months away, but we are getting closer and closer every single day. Of course, welcome to the show. Of course, this is the Four Verticals Podcast. Again, episode 175. Got reaction to spring games, a huge reaction show. This is mainly what the show will be today, is reaction to spring games, a spring games reaction special, if you will. And then we'll also round up the show with the best quarterbacks in the ACC as well. A bit of, again, a shorter show because, where we are right now in the schedule. But it should be a good show for you guys. A lot of things to discuss. A lot of spring games, quarterback battles, injuries, and notes, observations to be made. Then, of course, we'll go over the ACC best quarterbacks. Who are the best quarterbacks in the ACC? We don't know, but or at least we don't know yet, but we have an idea who it could be. So all that. Of course, we are back to our normal schedule, show on Tuesday. Live for on YouTube, Spotify. This won't matter, but of course, we are live on YouTube again, as per usual. Again, like I've been saying, the schedule, for the most part, should be back to normal. But, last week was a bit of a weird situation the week before, so apologies for that. Again, if you are new here, we talk college football here all year round. We also have the Extra Pod, Four Verticals Extra Pod, so we talk about college football over there, but also Marvel news, Star Wars news, along with other questions you guys give us. And, of course, we also, on the big show as well, we talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, of course, on Thursday is the NFL Draft. We'll give my final prediction for whom the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will get in the first round, and sort of my expectations for the draft overall. Emphasis on whatever I think the Bucs will go in the draft, so we'll pay attention to that come Thursday. Also, because of the way the schedule is going to be like the next few weeks, there's I guess not in the next few weeks. So we have a vacation situation around Memorial Day, the week a couple days after. But because of that, a little bit of disruption there, we may or may not actually begin our record projection segment. We'll bring that back, which, of course, the record projection segment is where we basically predict kind of what we think the teams will do in college football, right? So we may do that next week, next Thursday or Tuesday. I haven't decided yet. Thursday, we will probably do our post-spring top 25. So we'll give you guys a bit of a indication where I think teams are currently. So we'll do that Thursday. But again, yes, next week, a strong possibility we might be starting our record projection segment and along with our spicy predictions as well. So we might be starting those very soon. So keep an eye on that on the socials. Of course, you can follow us on Instagram, X. We are back on X again. Don't know what happened there, but we are back on there as usual. And we are also, of course, on Spotify and on YouTube as well. Make sure to follow over there. All right, let's get into the show here. Again, a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of the spring games. We'll go into that here real quick. Here, get some water. There we go. All right, spring game reactions. We're going to go over sort of maybe the next couple of days, a rolling reaction of spring games that we have seen already. We have a few of them here we'll go over in detail here, sort of break these all down. I think we have, how many we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I believe, spring games. And we'll go for all these in detail to some extent. Now, granted, most of these are not on TV, so we couldn't actually watch these. Some of these were, like Michigan and Ohio State were on TV. Clemson's were not. Clemson was not. Auburn was not. Texas A&M was not. Bama was definitely not. So a lot of these are either general observations and rumors and stuff we have heard. So again, it's not the best. It would have been a lot different 10 years ago when we had all these on TV. But anyway, first up here, Michigan. So yes, Michigan had their spring game this weekend, I believe. The offense was kind of meh, if you will. Now, the thing I have written here in my notes is, should you be concerned, right? Of course, most of you probably saw Bryce Underwood play. Looked somewhat underwhelming. Sort of a theme, if you will, in spring practice. If you haven't noticed that, you're going to see, for most cases, a lot of these quarterbacks struggle. But the thing is, that most of these quarterbacks who end up struggling are typically ones who have their main skill set being limited, which is running the football, right? Because most quarterbacks in spring are not live. So quarterbacks like, Byron Brown, for example, at Auburn, Bryce Underwood at Michigan, these guys, the main skill set is their legs, okay? They, like this. here on YouTube. So their main skill set of running the football is taken away. They are not able to do that. So that is why you kind of see sort of a very odd stilted performance. So just to put it out there again, it's not as surprising if you see certain types of quarterbacks struggle in the spring, who, because of, again, the way these games are set up, you have to be more of a pocket passer. So, for example, Ohio State, their situation there of quarterback, no problem. But for Michigan, Auburn, and a few others that I have seen and heard about, this is an issue because, again, some of these schools have to do with their quarterbacks. Since they're not live, they have to be sort of adapt to become pocket passers, and they're not pocket passers. So just a little bit of a disclaimer there. And that goes for Michigan. I think, to answer the question, should you be concerned about their offense? Should you be concerned about the way Bryce Underwood performed? I would say not yet. Again, because the way the spring games are set up, because there are scrimmages, and because there is certain limitations on the fact that you can't let these guys run around and do what they usually do in normal games and normal settings, you are going to have these limitations. So with Michigan, I don't know. I don't think there is any issues with their offense. I don't think there is. Now, again, I'll say this for a lot of teams. If you see this transition to, let's say, the fall, you start to hear, reports during these fall scrimmages of, hey, there's some issues with the offense again. They threw more interceptions. They were very slow and clunky. Then I would start to get concerned. But in the spring, not so much. So for Michigan, the offense, I'm not totally concerned about. I think another thing to think about here is who's going to step up at the receiver position. That's one thing I think I will take away from spring, is that, at least from what I can tell, there hasn't been one real clear number one receiver. I thought they would have gotten one in the portal back in the winter, around December and January, like guys like Cam Coleman, who left Auburn, would have been a huge fit for Michigan, but he ended up not going there. So they don't, at least in my opinion, have a true number one wide receiver, obviously with the Kyle Whittingham offense and who he's bringing in. As they bring in the OC from Utah this past season, I'm not expecting them to be a heavy passing team. I think they will emphasize running the football, running quarterback. That is why, again, I'm not concerned about offenses like, Michigan, because the way the spring game is structured, someone like Bryce Underwood is going to be handcuffed. You can't really unleash him, if you will. So I'm not concerned about Michigan in terms of like the way Bryce Underwood looks. Okay, so overall, the offense, I'm not concerned, but if there's one area that I'm not going to say concerned, but curious about leaving spring, is certainly the wide receiver position, right? Who is going to step up, especially when you have teams who have really good defenses and know, hey, there's certain limitations, and because of Kyle Whittingham's sort of offensive doctrine, if you will, the doctrine he uses, there are limitations, right, in terms of how far can you take a pure running offense against these really physical defenses, like Ohio State, like teams in the past, like Penn State and Michigan State. There are limitations there eventually that will come and bite you. So I just wonder in time, in certain games where you may have to throw the ball a bit more for Michigan, who is going to step up at receiver? I don't think we got those answers yet in the spring. Hopefully those will come in the fall. I don't know. But that is one thing that I am curious about for Michigan. But overall, with the offense, I'm not too concerned. The same thing with Auburn. Byron Brown did not look very good out Auburn. You think he threw 2 interceptions, and there may have been a fumble in there as well. The other quarterbacks, were a little bit better. Again, much like Michigan, Auburn's offensive doctrine under Alex Galesh, same thing with Josh Heupel. Again, this whole veer and shoot, Baylor Brile style of offense, seemingly it basically requires you to have a dual threat quarterback for the most part. Again, we've seen it have success in pocket passers, Joe Milton, Joey Aguilar last year. But again, based on the offensive doctrine, historically with this type of offense, you need a running quarterback. And again, unfortunately, because of the way these spring games are set up, you cannot necessarily have a running quarterback in spring unless they just go with a normal jersey. That really rarely ever happens. So because you were sort of, I guess, what's the right word here? I guess construed. Yeah, I guess construed and sort of, boxed in with some of the ways you can run your offense because of the spring game rules. Again, you couldn't let Byron Brown run the football, which is his main skill set, is his legs. And because of it, you take that away, you have to force these guys who are not traditional pocket passers to become pocket passers. So, again, Byron Brown, him struggling to throw the football and stay in the pocket, that's not a surprise. That's not his skill set. Again, I'm not saying this to say he's a bad quarterback. He's not. if you were to have this be a regular, like normal game, instead of being a scrimmage, then yes, you would see Byron Brown look a lot better. I don't think you would have, these turnover issues and him just look completely pedestrian. No, I think you would have a lot better numbers and certainly have way more ability to and way more autonomy to run the football, right? So for Auburn, I'm not concerned there. Now, I will say, though, backup quarterbacks for the future for Auburn, if, let's just say, for some reason Byron Brown doesn't work out and he's not ready to jump up in the competition from going from the G5 to the SEC, I guess you can say you're, a little bit happier about the future than you're about the current. But then again, because of the limitations of the spring game, the way Byron Brown performed, it's not surprising. Again, his skill set is not being a pocket passer. He's a dual threat quarterback. That's just who he is, right? Go ask Bill Napier in Florida. Go ask all these other teams USFB last year, right? Because that's just not the reality of the situation near Byron Brown. So I'm not concerned about them necessarily. Though I will say for Auburn's defense, a bit of a plus, if you will, getting multiple turnovers. Again, remember, they kept DJ Durkin. DJ Durkin could have easily left after last year being the interim coach. If you rarely see a interim coach who was on the previous staff get retained in a major position, right? Now, for Auburn, ironically, you had this happen with Carnell Williams, with Hugh Freeze, going from Brian Harsin to Hugh Freeze. But to have someone like TJ Durkin, who was the interim coach and also the defensive coordinator, so someone who is higher on the pecking order, this is very rare. So for Auburn fans, this is a good sign. I will say this is a very good sign that your defense is actually has the capability of playing pretty well. So again, for both Auburn and Michigan, interesting that I have them both up first. Their main problem here is, again, because of the limitations of the spring with the spring game, their style of quarterbacks that they have, we're not able to use all their full skills. At least the skills they have, that make them successful, right? Which is their legs. Again, unfortunately, because of the way the games are structured, they cannot use their legs and run the football. So that's why you had to see Byron Brown and Bryce Underwood look like pocket passers. So that will at least explain the reason why you saw Auburn and Michigan look the way they did offensively. I'm not totally concerned. There's just some curiosities, if you will, going forward, especially with Michigan with the receivers. I just don't know who really has stepped up after the spring. A bit of a mystery to me. But I will tell you who has stepped up for Ohio State is another freshman wide receiver. No shock there, right? Chris Henry Jr., freshman wide receiver, 5-star, made a huge impact on Saturday. He looked pretty good. The offense looked fairly well, I guess, to a certain extent. Again, it is a spring game, so there's only so much you can take away from the offense, especially with dual threat quarterbacks. Still, for Ohio State, don't have a dual threat quarterback of Julian Sain. He's not a dual threat guy. He's a pocket passer. So this is actually the way the spring game is structured for those type of quarterbacks is actually good. At least it doesn't ruin them as much. So Ohio State, Christopher Jr. looked pretty good. Other spots of Ohio State, certainly a lot of flexing, if you will, talent for the most part. But he definitely stepped up along with, just thinking about it right now, like you have Chris Henry Jr., but you also have guys like Jeremiah Smith. So you had another Ohio State receiver you have to worry about. So that is certainly some good stuff there from Ohio State. No shock there. Clemson, though, we haven't talked about Clemson in about a while. Dabo Swinney and them, they were just, hanging out. A lot of folks criticizing him, a lot of folks shitting on him. Dabo's a grown man. He can deal with it. Of course, they, bring in Chad Morris, comes back after, almost a decade now being away. He's back as the OC. Got a very interesting description here from Clemson. As we get some more water here. Got a very interesting description again from Clemson. So here's sort of what I'll say here that's on my notes. Chris Vizina, the quarterback there, likely to start for them. Nothing against him, but just some of the things I've heard about him, whether it's, Bud Elliott on Cover 3 talking about how, the recruiting world wasn't really over the moon about him. Just kind of cautious about him, I would just say. Not really sure to think of him. So he started for Clemson. Of course, he is projected to be the starter. Looked comfortable in the offense. That's good. Again, they are bringing back the Chad Morris offense, which really isn't really that much of a difference of what they're running previously before they got when I'm blanking on his name, Riley, the previous OC. I forget his last name. Garrett Riley. Yeah, a little bit. We had I don't know, like an intermission, I guess, in between Garrett Riley and the previous OC, and now Chad Moore's comeback, which is basically the same offense that they were running before Garrett Riley got there, which was basically like what Tony Elliott ran at Clemson. So, okay, he looked comfortable in the offense. That's good. True freshman quarterback there, Tate Reynolds, emerged as a really good, option there as well for Clemson. He looked pretty good. I think he went 7-10, passing, 74 yards and a touchdown. Running backs for Clemson, Gideon Davidson probably will be your starter for them. He's a sophomore at 80 yards on 9 carries, including like a 30-plus yard run. So the biggest concern for Clemson is not necessarily the defense, because I think the defense, especially with Tom Allen being their second year in the system, I think they should be fine. I'm not totally concerned about that. The offense, though, I was, again, because they brought in Chad Morris. Again, I'm nothing against Chad Morris, but it kind of seems like Dabo went from experimenting to now, okay, we're reverting back to comfortability, something that we're more comfortable with instead of being more vulnerable, right? Because it seemed like with Dabo, by hiring Garrett Riley a couple years ago, it seemed like, oh, now he's finally being more vulnerable. He's being, more willing to bring in different, voices in the offensive room. And it looks like that was a good, step in the right direction, but it turns out, at least from the Clemson perspective, it was not. So they went back from being vulnerable to now being less vulnerable and hiring someone who they are more comfortable with, and Chad Morris, and someone who, needless to say, who doesn't have a lot of credibility recently. I mean, he got fired from Arkansas, flamed out Auburn with Malzahn. He got fired there. He's been sort of swimming around other programs, if you will. I think he went back to high school for a little bit as a coach. So now he's back at Clemson. So my fear was, okay, now they're stepping back even more into what they were doing before, right, with Tony Elliott and the other coordinator they had after he left, before Garrett Riley. But definitely, I guess, some good news that the offense looked somewhat comfortable. Vizina looked comfortable. They also have a good option with Reynolds as a backup. Grant you, I don't think Tate Reynolds will be starting at quarterback. I do believe it will be Chris Vizina, but we'll see. But certainly some good news that they have Gideon Davis, run the football pretty well, which, by the way, was a weakness for Clemson last year. They could not run the football at all to save themselves. They were terrible last year. I mean, go look at the freaking, LSU game last year. Grant you, yes, that was going up against Blake Baker's defense, but still, I mean, they were terrible at run the football. So it's good to see Clemson kind of get some stability there, it seems like. So at least you have your starting quarterback. At least you have your starting running back at least set up there. But defensively, no real concern there. I think they'll be fine. I trust Tom Allen. He's a very competent head coach. Wide receivers, we'll see who steps up there. I mean, that's another, kind of like Ohio State. We're not Ohio State. Their rival, though, Michigan, is what I was going to say. Is sort of the other, I guess, comparison, if you will, to Clemson, where, yes, I'm not totally concerned about their offense for different reasons, but wide receiver-wise, well, yes, it's nice that, the passing game looked kind of competent for a spring game, and the running game looked pretty good. I just need to know, is there the wide receiver number one for Clemson? Of course, we'll have enough time to go over that. And, of course, they also have fall practice, too. Again, for all these teams, again, they have fall camp coming up in 3 to 4 months. So there's still time to figure things out, but the timeline is starting to shrink. That a lot of these programs that finish up spring, for the most part. Up next here, Texas A&M. Based on, again, what we have heard, field goal kicking was good, of a positive. The last time we saw A&M in that stadium against Miami, it was a total disaster, a quagmire, field goal kicking. That's been fixed, so that's good. The offense, again, much like Auburn and Michigan, because of Marcel Reed and who he is, he's not even a dual threat, more of a pure runner type quarterback, heavily limited. Hearing some different things about how he was very ineffective, but also somewhat effective. So there again, much like Auburn and Michigan, again, because of the whole constraints you have with dual threat quarterbacks in spring games, no surprise there in terms of the offense being kind of what it was. Now, the big issue is not necessarily that, is injury. Damian Stanford, he's a linebacker for Texas A&M. He was supposed to be a very vocal leader, impact player for them on defense. He got injured very early in the game, and it's sort of kind of the way like Josh Pate described it. It was kind of like a deflating sensation where, the whole atmosphere and the building just went like just like snap, it's gone. As soon as he went down very early in the game. Haven't heard anything else. Rumors are out there. It could be an ACL. So if that's the case, he is out for the entire year. More than likely, he's not coming back. Which sucks for A&M because they really need that defense to be very very good. They need it to be a strong point. They need it to be the focal point of their team because if how limited at times their offense can be, and especially now with a new offensive coordinator coming in, they have to promote from internally. With Colin Klein leaving, we have Marcel Reed. He's a good running quarterback, passing the football. He is who he is in terms of what we know of him so far. Now, could he amp up to another level? Who knows? He could, right? There's nothing says he can't, but it's just history and sort of A&M under Mike Elko has sort of shown, there are certain limitations into what they have currently, right? So, like, I'm not expecting Marcel Reed to all of a sudden become sort of elevate to the level of, let's say, like a Bryce Young, for example, in the past, where he can run the football, but his main his main skill set was also throwing the football. I just don't see that with someone like Marcel Reed. He just seems, at least to me, he seems very, very, very limited, which is a bit of a concern for A&M, especially if their defense is taking a huge hit like this with someone who is a vocal leader in Sanford, right? But while that is an issue for A&M defensively, they still have Mike Elko. I still trust him. I still trust that they will find a way to sort of plug in the holes in the ship. Yes, there is a hole in the ship. It's a very big hole, but there is alternatives to prevent a total implosion from happening, right? Like there are ways to get that to sort of like mediate that from being a total disaster. And look at their schedule again. They play teams like LSU, Bama, and also Arizona State. So it'll be interesting to see early on in the year. And of course, the next time we hear from them again will be in fall camp, right? It'd be really, really, really interesting to see who steps up there. I mean, they've recruited very well. Again, I trust Mike Elko to at least find someone to replace him. But I'm going to look at their schedule real quick here. We may as well do that. But again, like just given the fact that you lose someone like this who is a leader and who expects to be a leader on the defense, it definitely hurts. But again, because of Mike Elko, I think I can trust him. But again, here's their schedule. So they have Arizona State early. That's week 2. They have to go to LSU again. Then they have Arkansas and Missouri. Out of those games, and they also have, I think I mentioned Kentucky as well. Out of those games I just mentioned before they play their FCS team, the ones I'll be, I guess, concerned with having a new face there stepping up on the linebacking core is Arizona State, LSU, and Missouri. Those are 3 games here that you could easily lose if those holes are not properly filled with the right personnel. Again, it's not a total it's not a total death sentence. It's not a total just all right. Kill the rats, torch the barn scenario. The whole thing's going down. I'm not saying that. Again, I'm not saying that A&M totally doomed and this is a total DEFCON 5 scenario. But you have to understand the limitations here and the reality. You are losing someone who was supposed to be a very vocal leader. But again, I trust Mike Elko to get this fixed. I trust there is a contingency plan for guys to step up. Some of them may have to be young, so you have to get these guys ready to go and make sure they can learn on the fly. But again, luckily, this did happen during spring. There's summer off, off the book workouts. You also have fall camp going on and more scrimmages down the road. It's not a total panic scenario, but I understand why folks are getting a little bit more concerned. Now, of course, as you go down the rest of the list here, again, you have Bama down the road eventually. You have to go to South Carolina. You have Tennessee. You have Oklahoma. You have Tennessee at home. You have Oklahoma on the road. You have to host Texas, right? So hopefully by then you have whomever this replacement is for Sanford. That should be at least there should be a little bit more calm instead of just complete all-out chaos and just total insanity ensuing. So that's the whole situation with A&M in the spring game. And then finally here we'll end this segment with this is Alabama, right? They had their spring game a couple weeks ago, I believe. A bit of an interesting situation. So the whole talk going into the spring game was Austin Mack versus Keelan Russell. Is it a QB controversy? Which is not. I agree with Josh Pate. There's no such thing as a QB controversy. It's just You just have a quarterback battle, right? You have a quarterback battle, or a more proper term would be a situation, right? For Bama, again, the whole thing was Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, the guy who's a true freshman last year, versus someone who understands Keelan DeBoer. He's been with him for a number of years now. He was with him at Washington. He understands the system. He's a lot bigger than Keelan is. Keelan's a bit shorter. Austin's a lot bigger, muscle-wise and height. He also, again, knows the offense a lot more. So that was the whole battle going into spring, back around January and February, right? That was the whole sort of rhetoric back then. Then the rhetoric became before the spring game was, well, Keelan's doing pretty well. Some practices, other people are saying, oh, Austin Mack's not doing as well. He's sort of, trending a lot more. And folks are saying, maybe we should sell stock on Keelan Russell. Then the spring game happened, right? The actual spring game happened, and Keelan looked pretty good, I guess. He looked okay. Austin Mack wasn't bad either. So again, the whole way I can describe this whole Bama situation at quarterback is just that. It's a situation. There's really no controversy. Is it a battle as well? Yes, but I think the best way I can put it as it's a situation. They have two good options. It's not a controversy. You just have two really good options. And either one they go with, I'll be totally fine with. Whether it's Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, I don't think it really matters, right? I don't think Keelan DeBoer, really, I don't think to him, he wouldn't be considered any of these guys playing. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me that both of them are going to play week one. We can look at their schedule too. I mean, I don't think they play anyone meaningful week one. I don't think, at least I don't believe they do. We can double check. I believe the Florida State game is week 3 or something like that, which is very odd. Let me see here. Go down to their schedule. Yeah, so they play a G5 team. Perfect. You go to Kentucky. That really doesn't put the fear of God into you at all. So that should concern you. Then you have Florida State. Then you have South Carolina, and you have the rest of the games before Georgia, and it gets really real in a hurry. So there is some runway here to whomever the starter is going to be, whether it's Keelan Russell or Austin Mack. To me, I don't care. The only difference between Austin Mack and Keelan Russell is one guy's a lot bigger, more of a pocket passer. He can run a little bit, but he's more or less a more like a field general, right? And Austin Mack. Whereas Keelan Russell, yeah, he can run around in circles. He has a good arm as well, but his main skill set is run the football. So to me, and to Keelan DeBoer, and to anyone else running that freaking building, it does not matter who's the starter. They trust both. I can guarantee you, if you were to put truth serum into Keelan DeBoer, that whole freaking staff there, whether it's Ryan Grubb or the quarterback's coach or whomever, if you were to put truth serum into any of these guys on the offensive side of the football, they'll probably say some version of, whomever it is, I really don't care. We have two good options, right? I know publicly they'll say, well, there's still a long ways to go. I do believe, and my whole of hearts here, and this is no insider information. I have no one's telling me anything else, anything like that. Actually, I'm going to add something here, two more on the cover, actually. Just my humble opinion is that I firmly believe they, in Tuscaloosa, the coaching staff there on the offensive side, they think that they can win with anyone, whomever the quarterback is, whether it's Austin Mack or Keelan Russell. It really doesn't matter to them. They can start either one of these guys. They can be like, all right, that's fine. No real fear here. You should be fine. So I trust them with that. Defensively for Bama, I think they'll be kind of around they were last year, maybe a little bit better. But I think the offensive side is obviously the area where you want to see improvement, right? Especially with running the football, which is the other thing too, right? Again, as long as they can run the football, regardless of who the quarterback is, Bama fans will be happy. Keelan DeBoer will be happy. Ryan Grove will be happy. We'll be happy. Maybe not me, exactly, but everyone will be fine. Okay, I think we can just turn on the rhetoric and turn on the temperature on Keelan DeBoer and his whole hot seat conversation, which is also insane. I don't think he's on any hot seat at all, in my opinion, at least as of right now. Now, maybe once we get into the season, maybe that rhetoric changes a little bit, but we'll see. And then finally, I kind of lied earlier when I said Bama was the last one. We actually have some breaking news. Now, it's not actually breaking right now. This happened a little bit ago. Make sure I get this correct here. Double check. I'm pretty sure this is correct. Let me see. Hold on real quick. I'm going to do some quick research. So FSU, I believe this has been decided. Okay, yeah. So Ashton Daniels, yeah. So he is officially the starter for Florida State. I believe Mike Norvell. Let me see. Yes, he revealed it today. He is your starter for Florida State. No surprise there, and I think this speaks to a wider conversation about Florida State, which we'll eventually get to. Spoiler: there probably will be, much like last year, our team will do our record projection on that. Even with Malzahn retiring, right? He's not there anymore. He's actually back at Auburn, Alabama, where he still has his lake house one. By the way, true story. I've actually seen it in person before. Of their back last 4th of July visiting folks. So yeah, he's Malzahn's gone and he's retired and whatnot. He's enjoying the rest of his life. So he's gone. But even though he's gone, the feeling out of Tallahassee is coming from whether it's Knowles 247 or people like Bud Elliott, that the whole talk out of Florida State was, yes, Malzahn's gone, but they're still, even with him gone, and they're promoting from within, they're still going to run the Malzahn stuff. Like, they still have the personnel there to do it. They still have the the idea of doing it. Again, Mike Norvell and Malzahn's systems are very, very similar to each other. There's no real difference, really. They're kind of like, there's really no difference there. I mean, they're basically the same thing. There's really maybe a minor change in terms of certain formations, but largely the same thing. So the whole feeling was, okay, even though Malzahn's gone, they're still going to run the Malzahn stuff. The personnel they have after the disposal is the Malzahn personnel. They have the stuff there to run that. You don't there won't be any reason why you wouldn't run something else. You're going to run the Malzahn stuff. So that's why the whole feeling was, even with the whole talk about Kevin Sperry and should he be the starter over Ashton Daniels going into spring and after the season was over, and once they knew they were getting Ashton as their quarterback in the portal, that Ashton Daniels was likely to be your starter. Do you have your footage from him from Auburn and Stanford? He's a good dual threat guy. He can run around, and he has a decent arm. I think there is some evidence out there that he's maybe a little bit better than folks give him credit for. To look at the Vanderbilt tape last year for Auburn, definitely had a very competent performance versus what you had elsewhere for Auburn. It just seemed like to me from the beginning that he was going to be your option for Auburn, or your option for Florida State. Period. I don't think there's any other direction they're going to go. That's just me thinking, or at least that was me thinking beforehand. I could have been wrong, and obviously I'm not wrong because he's the starter now. So you have him as your starter. Does this change anything for my outlook for Florida State when we eventually do our record projection, which is, again, if you've forgotten, best case, worst case scenario, and was reasonable? It doesn't matter. It won't change anything whether it was him or Kevin Sperry. I think Daniels gives you the experience edge over Kevin, but it really doesn't matter in terms of what the offense will look like. It's going to look how it's going to look regardless. So there's some, I guess, some breaking news, if you will, with Ashton Daniels being named the starter for FSU. And that's it for the spring stuff. And that's about 30 minutes long there, almost. So that was, again, like I said, was largely going to be most of our show was going to be a reaction to spring practices wrapping up. So there is that. Get some more water real quick here. Been a very, very warm here in Jacksonville. And in fact, as we're sort of in the middle of the show, looking ahead to the temperatures, it's going to be really, really, really hot. The next week, it's going to be like near 90s, like 90 and above. It's very, 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 very warm. Summer already here in Florida, which is the sort of joke here in Florida where you have two seasons, spring and summer. Spring is literally like spring/fall, then you have summer. There's really only usually really only 2 seasons here in Florida, which is crazy to think about. Really is a two-season state. So yeah, it's really warm, very hot. I went with my run a little bit ago, about an hour and a half ago. Yeah, this is a day that it's not even that hot. It's the temperatures in the 70s, I believe, but because we had the cold front moving in. But anyway, not to go into weather nerd mode here. But yeah, it's been very warm out here. It was nice today though, but man, it was miserable this weekend in terms of the heat, and it's going to be miserable again later this week. Along to this severe weather pattern ramping up once again, and also moving into our region, the southeast here, like Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, could be undergoing for some very, very active weather. More on that probably on the Thursday show. Probably touch on that again. But yeah, been very warm up here outside. The wildfire stuff here not far from Jacksonville, just southeast of here. There's one near in Clay County, which is south of Duval County, which is Jacksonville. Anyway, yes, again, as we are here in the midpoint of the show, not to get into a whole weather tangent, but again, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I know, again, our schedule's been very, very off lately, but we are getting back to at least some sort of normalcy. So hopefully it stays that way for a little bit. Again, we do have a vacation time coming up soon, so there might be some disruption coming up. So that's, again, why we might be moving some stuff around with the schedule. But at least for a little bit, we'll be back to normal in terms of having 2 shows per week. So keep an eye on the channel for that. And also other future announcements. Again, we are back on Twitter again. A long story short, we are back. So be sure to follow us over there, and also on Spotify, the podcast feed, which is again where we do our extra pods. Which I think, yeah, we might as well just do one tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see. Tomorrow and probably Friday as well. So just be on the lookout for that extra pods. We'll get those in as well. A lot of things to discuss, by the way, on the extra pods. Those are very fun. So again, make sure to subscribe over there, and make sure you are following us on our social platforms, X and on Instagram. Okay, we're going to finish up here on the show. Again, a bit of a shorter show today because I have a feeling our Thursday show will be a little bit longer. Again, this is the type of year. This is the time of the year we don't have to have 4-hour shows, but we're not doing like 15-minute shows either. Like we're going to go for, I guess, around 40 minutes probably at most, which is not bad. We've had shorter shows before in the past. This is certainly going to be, slightly longer than short. So we've been doing this for the past week or so about who is the best quarterback in each major power conference, the conference, right? The P4. We've done the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12. Now we have the ACC. A lot of change, by the way, over here with the ACC, which is fun because now it seems like the ACC is becoming what the Big 12 was for a number of years, which was, as Josh Pitt used to put it, America's College Football Conference. Who knows? Maybe now that's shifting to the ACC. Who knows? You never know. So who is the best quarterbacks in the ACC? Now I have a list here. It's about 5, I believe. Not an exhaustive list. You can list anyone on here. Like, for example, Clemson, Chris Vizzina could have easily been on this list, but look, again, my confidence in him is as confident as it's going to rain today here in Jacksonville, which is not going to. So we have some names on here. Some of them may surprise you. One of them we just talked about, interestingly enough, if you were watching the full show. But anyway, let's get into this. So the first name I have up here is Darian Minshew from Miami. Based on what we heard from spring, and we just did a topic on, or at least we did a whole segment on spring practice. Based on what I've heard from spring practice, Darian Minshew looks very competent in this offense. Now, yes, it helps when you have your friend wide receiver transfer from Duke as well. But either with or without him, I think this will be a huge gift for them. He's a dual threat guy. I think he fits into what Shannon Dawson's willing to do as the OC. I think in Miami this year, at least in my opinion, I think the offense should be at least close to and maybe just slightly below where you were under Cam Ward, which is not bad. That's actually a very good thing. I mean, last year's offense was, kind of sweet and sour at times, even with them having a good record and going all the way to the national title, by the way. Just folks who've forgotten about that because everyone's, so fixated on Indiana and Coach Sig, and rightfully so. But Darian Minshew, he is someone, yes, clearly in the ACC, he would be a contender for the best quarterback in the conference, obviously. CJ Bailey at NC State could have also entered in the portal. He's not, which is interesting because he is still there. He fits in this as well. He's very underrated, much like Darian Minshew, dual threat guy, can run around. With NC State, and then with Derek Dorn, he's been around for a long, almost 12 years now, which is crazy. NC State has always been one of those teams, in my opinion, that's always been around, or at least been described as, well, they can be good. Like, they have, a very underrated home field advantage. I mean, Bud on Cover 3 talks about all the time, which is, the whole, Florida State, curse of going up to Carter Finley, and it's always a disaster up there. So, yes, they have the underrated home field. Dave Dorn's a very consistent head coach. But in my opinion, outside of, Jacoby Brissett, and maybe one other quarterback, they really have not gotten quarterback right. And I've always wondered if they just got a really good quarterback there, whether it was a really good pocket passer or a dual threat, what would NC State look like if they're actually a legit elite quarterback? Could TJ Bailey be that? I don't know. I mean, he's been in the program for about a couple years now. We'll see. He could be a factor there for NC State. I think NC State could be one of those teams where they're just kind of sneaking around, kind of swimming around there with the potential to cause some chaos. After whom we just talked about him, Florida State's a new starting quarterback, the incumbent starting quarterback, Ashton Daniels. officially announced today. Again, does this really matter in the whole picture for the ACC? Like, not really, but if Ashton Daniels, if he plays like he did at Auburn, especially in that Vanderbilt game, grant you with even worse wide receivers now because he went from having Cam Coleman, who's since left for Texas, but at the time Auburn had Cam Coleman, going from that to what you have at Florida State, which is kind of, the remnants, if you will, of the Malzahn experiment, which is I'm trying to say here, it's very limited. But if he can elevate a little bit and use his legs and sort of be able to, be creative and maybe elevate to a level that he hasn't been to before, it's certainly possible, right? Florida State could very easily be sort of like they were last year at the beginning of the year, in particular, maybe a little bit better than what you had. Maybe just a little bit better than what you expected, right? Again, go back to last year. They beat Alabama, and then all of a sudden they're 4-0 and right to the top 10. And everyone's like, man, this Florida State team's like better than they were, bro. Like, look at this, bro. They're all of a sudden, they're like a toddler consumer or something. Like, that was the talk after 4 weeks. Now, grant you, a lot of that was, I'm going to say it was like unjustified hype because it's like, I understand it. I get it. I feel, I sympathize with that. After beating Bama and everyone's riding high and thinking they're going to Charlotte, the ACC championship game, I get that, especially after what happened later that day in week 1 after Clemson fell to LSU. It's like, man, the ACC outside of like Miami is kind of a disaster, bro. Like, look at this, bro. Like, this is like, it's going to be easy. Then reality set in after the Miami game. You guys ended up losing a whole bunch of games. So again, who knows? Maybe Ashton Daniels, if you can just get to a level to where he was last year for Auburn, especially in that Vanderbilt game in terms of his performance, there is like a non-zero chance where they could be very similar to last year, where you could surprise some people. Granted, again, that's the task is a lot different, especially going to Bama early in the year, especially a Bama team that has been severely motivated, especially after what happened to you last year, the whole revenge factor. So we'll see. After him, the quarterback who I believe started against you guys in his first start, Mason Heischel. I believe Heischel is how you pronounce it. I actually think I got that correct. From Pitt. I believe he was 5-0 as a starter, which is very, very odd stat. I did not realize that. But yeah, he was 5-0 last year. Could be a key. Sort of like with C.J. Bailey at NC State. Same thing with Pitt. Like, outside of Kenny Pickett, you really haven't seen Pat Narduzzi have an elite quarterback. Again, outside of 2021, in 2022, you just haven't seen it. Now, could Mason Heischel be kind of like Kenny Pickett type in terms of elevating that program just a little bit, being a very special player? I don't know, but that is one name I'm certainly paying attention to and certainly will be watching with great interest this year. And then after him, and the ACC, at least in my opinion, if we're looking at the candidates for the best quarterbacks, is, of course, Ethan Grunkemeyer at Virginia Tech. Comes over from Penn State with James Franklin. They both come as seemingly a package deal, if you will. He is there. This one, to me, is more or less based on trust. I think he could be pretty good. Again, he was flushed in last year after the way the season was going and after, Aller gets injured. But Grunkemeyer wasn't the problem last year. The problem was, poor defense and just the whole thing collapsing in front of our eyes at Penn State. I just wonder with him going to Virginia Tech along with James Franklin, just the whole reset theory, right? That once you leave, like, the whole theory is that, especially now with the portal and the way the coaching carousel is, when a coaching staff and his roster leave somewhere else after they get fired, in the case of James Franklin, they go somewhere else, and all of a sudden it's, all they needed was just a reset, and all of a sudden they've elevated themselves, and all of a sudden they're more loose, and there's more, I don't know, like more life, more energy. Now, this theory also applied to Texas A&M hiring Jimbo Fisher, right? Sort of the same idea. Jimbo leaves Florida. They didn't get fired, but I guess he kind of got fired. Leaves Florida State, goes to Texas A&M. Everyone thought, this is a nice reboot situation for Jimbo Fisher, sort of just resetting his career. Turns out not so much. Am I expecting that with Virginia Tech and James Franklin? I don't think so. I think James Franklin's a little bit more competent than Jimbo Fisher in terms of in some other areas, but look, who knows what it'll look like? What it'll look like this year? I'm confident in Virginia Tech. I'm confident in James Franklin. I still have a lot of trust in him. Yes, even with the fact that he got fired from Penn State, my faith in him has not decreased at all. And in fact, I'm almost more. I guess I should say I'm fully convinced, but I'm even more warming up to the fact that they could be really good this year, Virginia Tech. Again, both sides are desperate. Virginia Tech's desperate. James Franklin just needs to reboot his career. Like I've been saying, and Josh Pate's been saying, there's a real chance that this could be James Franklin 2.0. We had James Franklin, I guess maybe not 1.0, but maybe like 1.5. Now we're getting James Franklin 2.0, hopefully. So Gurk Meyer should be on there as well. And I think he's definitely has the candidate. He's definitely a candidate to be one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. Now, if I had to choose any of these names, you're just doing it right now. If I was forced to do it, who do I think is the best quarterback right now in the ACC? Probably Jerry Mensa, and then after him, probably Gurk Meyer, then Heichel, then CJ Bailey, then Ashton Daniels. Maybe you bring in a quarterback from Clemson, Chris Vizina, also in the mix as well. But at the moment, those are probably your 5 names I'm looking at. Could be totally wrong on that, but that's the way I see it. But again, could be wrong. And looking here, that's it for the show. That's it. So again, probably an extra pod tomorrow. I'll let you guys know on the socials. Now we're back on Twitter now. I can actually announce things to you guys. Yeah, so we'll probably do an extra pod tomorrow early, I think in the morning. Then we'll probably do one on Friday. We'll show. So again, typical week it looks like going forward. So just keep that in mind. Nothing really else to talk about right now on the show. I mean, that's kind of it for the list here in the show notes. So until Thursday for the main show, again, keep an eye on the podcast feed, keep an eye on Twitter for any number of developments. But yeah, normal week this week, normal week next week. Again, we have once we get to May and around Memorial Days where things get a little bit weird, but that's kind of expected. So just keep that in mind. So until Thursday, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, your Wednesday, and until then, take care, and we will see you guys on the next stream.